everyone, it's Amar from Toronto.
And it's Erin.
And it's your weekly dose of Das Criminal as recommended by your doctor.
Welcome, everyone.
And this episode was requested by our good friend and listener, Jamie. So, hi, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie. It's a wild case, guys.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, but also you sort of melted our brains, or at least my brains. Like, you've thrown me down a rabbit hole that's been a hell of a ride.
This is, at least in the US, this is a pretty well-known case. It's been dramatized, a couple times, has documentaries and things like that. We do want to mention, we know that the term gypsy is an anti-Zionist slur, and we are only using it here because it's one of the main characters' names. I would not name my kid a derogatory term, but I would not do most of the things that Dee Blanchard does. So keep this in mind.
Yeah, I mean, the name is just letting you. It's like a teaser, like a little appetizer of.
Exactly. Naming your child Gypsy Rose is the first crime among many.
Yeah. If you're wondering what kind of episode this is going to be, a lady by the name of Claudine Blanchard, who goes by Dee, named her child Gypsy Rose. So make of that what you will. I just wanted to warn everyone that there will be points in this case where we do discuss sexual assault and rape. So it's a content warning for if you're not comfortable listening to that. We completely understand, and you might want to skip this episode.
Yep, join us next week.
Yeah, so without further ado, let's dive in, shall we?
Of course.
Late in the night of June 14th, 2015, police in Greene County, Missouri, found the body of Claudine Dee Blanchard. She had been stabbed to death in her own home. Her chronically ill daughter, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, was nowhere to be found. Police had gone to the Blanchard house just outside of Springfield, Missouri, to check in on the single mother and child after neighbors and friends had reported concerning Facebook posts on Dee's profile.
That bitch is dead. I fucking slashed that fat pig and raped her sweet, innocent daughter. Her scream was so fucking loud. LOL.
But where is Gypsy Rose? And who killed Dee? One day later, police traced Gypsy to a house in Wisconsin, where she was staying with her boyfriend Nicholas Godejohn. The two were arrested and charged with first-degree murder of Dee Blanchard. What shocked neighbors and friends even more, however, was the sight of Gypsy walking on her own 2 feet, perfectly fine and apparently healthy. Until then, everyone had believed that Gypsy was paralyzed from the waist down and required a wheelchair to move. So what caused Gypsy and her boyfriend Nick to stab Dee and flee together?
Inside the bubblegum pink Blanchard house lay a nightmarish web of delusion, deceit, and abuse that eventually escalated to murder. This case reminds me in some ways actually of the Joshua Boyle and Caitman Coleman case that we covered a couple episodes ago in a few ways. First, the elements of captivity and abuse. But also, there are no very reliable narrators here, in part likely due to this abuse, which we'll get into. And we understand the facts of this case. We're going to lay them out to you. But the motives behind certain actions here are still really shrouded in mystery. Hulu did a series on this case, like a dramatized series. So it's not, 100% true, but it's called The Act. And there's a character named Mel who acts as the audience foil. At the end of this unraveling, she says, "No version of this makes sense." And I think that kind of sums it up. Like, we can put the pieces together, but you can't quite put your finger on one thing that would cause all of this and motivate all of this. There's just so much going on here.
Yeah, like reading into this and watching these documentaries, I kept thinking to myself, I wish I had the power of telepathy. I just wanted to know what people were thinking at particular points in time.
Yeah.
Like, it's just fascinating to follow their trains of thought.
The case itself, if you gave me $1 million, I could not write you a story this good. But actually, now that I think about it, the Gillian Flynn novel, Sharp Objects, has a lot of parallels in the HBO series. I'm not going to, give any spoilers here, but I checked and that novel came out in 2006 and this happened in 2015. So that's creepy. Everything about this is creepy.
Yeah. But I mean, it was building up to this since the birth of Gypsy in 1991. It was a train that had no brakes, I think.
Yeah. So let's get into it.
Yeah. To begin, I just want to quote the Prophet Muhammad in one of his hadiths. He says, "Heaven is under the feet of mothers." If heaven is under the feet of Claudine Blanchard, I certainly don't want to end up there. So Claudine Dee Blanchard was born Claudine Pitre in Chack Bay, Louisiana in 1967 to Claude Pitre and Emma Gisclair. She had 5 siblings, and it appears that she had a relatively normal childhood. Dee did work as a nurse's aide at some point as a young adult. When she was 24, she met Rod Blanchard, 17 at the time, and got pregnant by him. They hastily got married, but just before Gypsy Rose's birth on July of 1991, Rod left as he felt he got married for the wrong reasons. Dee took her newborn daughter to live with her and her family.
Like we mentioned at the top of the show, there aren't very many reliable narrators in this story, especially not Dee. So we're sewing together bits and pieces of articles like Michelle Dean's BuzzFeed article, Aaron Lee Carr's HBO documentary, Mommy, Dead and Dearest, and Hulu's dramatized version of this case in The Act, which we're not taking literally, don't worry. We're not going to just make up facts from a television show. But Dee, she characterized Rod to Gypsy and those around them as a deadbeat dad and even abusive, but those accusations don't really add up. Rob always paid his child support, usually around $1,200 per month, for instance. And though Gypsy may have believed that he was cruel because that's what her mother told her, she didn't actually have any memories of her own of Rod being abusive apart from what Dee had planted.
Yeah, so when Gypsy was 2 or 3, Dee announced to Rod, who remained involved with his daughter's life, that Gypsy had sleep apnea and required a breathing device. Unfortunately, Gypsy's diagnoses by Dee did not stop there. Over the course of Gypsy Rose's life, Dee had constructed an elaborate fantasy where Gypsy was afflicted with a myriad of disorders and conditions that include but are not limited to leukemia, asthma, epilepsy, muscular dystrophy, a chromosomal disorder, arrested mental development due to a premature birth, gastrointestinal issues, among other disorders and diseases. Gypsy was thought to be paralyzed from the waist down due to her muscular dystrophy and was thought to require a wheelchair to move around. She was G-tube fed, which is to say that there was a surgery where she got a tube inserted into her stomach and was fed liquids through that tube, and was on a closet full of medication for her various illnesses. Between 2005 and 2014, she was taken to the hospital by Dee over 100 times and went through several surgeries. Her salivary glands were removed, and eventually her teeth fell out due to the medications she was on. Moreover, Dee Blanchard has coerced Gypsy into pretending to be younger than she was, sometimes by several years. She kept Gypsy's head shaved, ostensibly due to leukemia, and had Gypsy wear wigs. Today, we now know that Gypsy, at the time of the murder, was a healthy 23-year-old adult who suffered none of the debilitating conditions Dee had imposed on her, save for astigmatism in her eyes. Thus, it appears that Dee Blanchard has been experiencing a severe case of Munchausen by proxy. For our lay listeners, Munchausen by proxy, also known as factitious disorder imposed on another, is a psychological disorder where a caregiver either feigns or actually induces illness in another person, usually their child. Usually, the caregiver seeks emotional gratification via care and sympathy that would be given to the ill child.
Factitious disorder imposed on another is most importantly a form of abuse. The medical violence against the victim's body is almost always accompanied with physical and emotional abuse as well. This was the case with Dee's abuse of her daughter, Gypsy Rose. Gypsy recalls that at one point, after she had tried to flee from the home the pair shared and had been caught by Dee smashed her computer with a hammer and threatened to break her fingers too. At the same time, Dee was conducting an elaborate fraud scheme through Gypsy's illness. In addition to Rod's child support checks, she collected welfare from the state, donations from well-wishers all around the country, and even perks like a trip to Disney World from the Make-A-Wish Foundation, backstage passes to Miranda Lambert concerts, and the custom Habitat for Humanity home in Springfield, Missouri, constructed specifically to be accessible to Gypsy.
Can I jump in here for a second?
Of course.
Just thinking about this, I know this is like a very dark story, but the one thing that actually made me chuckle is that of all the singers you could get a backstage pass to because your daughter has quote-unquote leukemia, Why Miranda Lambert? Aim for the stars, go big, go for Beyonce, go for Rihanna. Who the fuck is Miranda Lambert?
She's a country singer.
Yeah,
They're from Louisiana.
I mean, fair enough. But even if it's a country singer, Taylor Swift, Luke Bryan, fucking hell.
I think it depends as well which celebrities are willing to cooperate with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I know John Cena, for instance, any child that wants to meet him through Make-A-Wish, he makes an effort to meet. He's really tight with Make-A-Wish.
He's a very pleasant guy, yeah.
So maybe it has something to do with who's accessible as well.
Maybe, I suppose. I don't know. I found this very funny and amusing.
Presumably, the creators of the Hulu series The Act titled it as such because everything Dee Dee did, right down to her kindergarten teacher wardrobe, was an act that she put on to outsiders, that of the caring mother to a disabled child. A persistent question, however, is to what extent Gypsy Rose was aware of The Act. We want to stress that Gypsy is absolutely a survivor of horrific abuse, some of which, like losing her teeth, will affect her for the rest of her life. We don't want to downplay that or suggest that she was somehow complicit. There's a really big difference between knowing or maybe highly suspecting something and being an active participant in it. Gypsy claims that the only medical condition she was sure for a long time was a facade was the paralysis of her legs. She knew that she was able to walk, but she didn't know that the other conditions were faked or caused by Dee Dee, and she wasn't totally sure of even basic autobiographical information like her own age. We can't emphasize enough the complete control that Dee Dee held over Gypsy. She had moved away from her family in Louisiana and alienated Gypsy from her father. She had pulled Gypsy out of school in order to homeschool her, claiming that Gypsy was too slow to keep up with the curriculum, thereby significantly reducing the chance that another adult would spot and report the abuse. Dee Dee and Gypsy shared a Facebook account so Dee Dee could monitor Gypsy and also solicit donations. Dee Dee even fooled doctors into giving Gypsy a feeding tube, which allowed her to pump into Gypsy's stomach whatever she liked, for instance, medications or even poison. By completely isolating Gypsy Rose, controlling her, and gaslighting her about her medical conditions, Dee Dee was able to manipulate her into being an effective tool in her sick fantasy. Gypsy recalls that when they visited healthcare professionals, Dee Dee would do all the talking, and when Gypsy absolutely needed to speak, Dee Dee would hold her hand the entire time and squeeze it if Gypsy said something wrong, like something she shouldn't be smart enough to articulate. Gypsy also speaks in this very high voice, like a child's voice. You can look up videos of it online, and it's very disconcerting to hear knowing that she's actually an adult when she sounds like this. I've looked up possible explanations for this, and it could be rooted in trauma and abuse, or it could be that Gypsy was rewarded by her mother when she spoke this way, and punished when she didn't, so she, consciously or otherwise pitched her voice as high as possible.
It's important to note here that at some point, Dee Dee and her daughter had moved in with Dee Dee's father and stepmother. Over a period of time, her stepmother had gotten seriously ill. At the same time, the family were seriously questioning Dee Dee's treatment of Gypsy and her overprotectiveness. This questioning led to Dee Dee moving out of her father's house to live with her daughter on their own in New Orleans before Katrina hit. Subsequently, Dee Dee's stepmother began feeling much better. The family now suspect that Dee Dee may have been poisoning her stepmother while she served her food with a brand of weed killer. Additionally, there are other theories that Dee Dee also killed her own mother by starving her to death. On their own, each theory is hard to believe, but put together as part of a larger picture, there seems to be a distinct pattern of toxic behavior and, frankly, abuse and criminal activity around Dee Dee Blanchard.
Despite her best efforts, however, Dee Dee couldn't trap Gypsy Rose in childhood forever, and Gypsy began developing an interest in sex and romance. After Dee Dee would fall asleep, Gypsy would log onto her laptop and visit one of her 5 secret Facebook accounts or dating sites like ChristianDatingForFree.com. This is what would eventually lead her to her literal partner in crime, Nicholas Godejohn.
Nicholas Godejohn met Gypsy on a Christian dating website. According to his parents, he's been diagnosed with autism and Asperger's disease. He also has a criminal record prior to the murder, being arrested in 2013 for watching pornography and fondling himself in a McDonald's.
For 9 hours. Ew, that's so gross.
Oh, it is. It's absolutely like freakish. But I mean, it's like a sign, like a red flag, if you will, for him.
Yeah, more red flags than China.
Yeah. After 4 days of talking to Gypsy, they entered into an online dating relationship. At this time, Nick has intimated his tastes for BDSM to Gypsy. Though Gypsy was uncomfortable, Nick convinced her to adopt a sort of daddy-dom dynamic. Part of this is that Nick seems to think that he has multiple identities, which I don't know if that's true or not, like if he actually believes that or if he's like a part of like an elaborate ruse. But he convinced Gypsy to create her own personalities such that each of his personalities would have a girlfriend in each of Gypsy's personalities. And in all of these personalities, Nick is like this dominant sort of controlling figure, and Gypsy is like a schoolgirl or a little like, vulnerable, like she acts as this like vulnerable young girl. And yeah, it's strange. And part of the role play, by the way, is Gypsy, like Dee Dee would have Gypsy's hair shaved short. So each personality of Gypsy would have a different wig to reflect the different personality. It's quite disturbing, like on so many levels, just bizarre.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Gypsy had gotten texts from Nick's ex warning her of him being like a dodgy creep and a weirdo, but Nick convinced Gypsy to chalk it off to jealousy.
Nick Godejohn is basically an incel that somehow managed to have sex. Like, he's got the severe lack of social skills, problems with women, internet addiction, like a general creepiness, and even a masturbatory sex offense. But somehow he managed to find a partner in Gypsy Rose Blanchard, and that tells me there is truly a lid to every pot.
Yeah, so if you're single out there, know that Gypsy Rose and Nicholas Godejohn were a couple. So there is
No
definitely a
excuses.
fish. There is a fish out there for you in the sea, so to speak.
But you know what else is in the sea? A lot of trash.
Yes, plastic and so on and so forth. And a lot of fish end up being choked by the trash, which I think is a very apt analogy.
Right.
I do want to say here, just going back to what we said earlier, I personally, at least I'm speaking for myself here, I don't have any problem with BDSM activities and lifestyle behaviors. And like, if you're into BDSM, like, kudos to you. You do you, as long as it's like two consensual adults, communication and honesty and like well understood boundaries. That being said, I really don't think what Gypsy and Nick had was healthy in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, I mean, they killed a person. Like,
I mean, even like before that happened, like I don't see how this was a healthy dynamic. Like if two
Right.
adults are having BDSM, fair enough, but this was not just that. It went way beyond that.
Yeah, I think these are two people, each with issues of their own, coming together. And rather than forging a healthy dynamic through that, like a supporter, it kind of exacerbated those issues.
Yeah, it's like adding water to magnesium, which, if you don't know, causes an explosion. So do not do that at home, children. A year into their relationship, Nick says that he'll protect Gypsy from anything. Gypsy asks anything, even my mom, in her sort of high-pitched, childlike voice. Nick reiterates his comment. Thus, Plan B was hatched, even though it was perpetually pushed back and not entirely organized in any way, shape, or form. Eventually, Gypsy Rose hatched another plan to have Nick run into her and her mom as they watched a movie in a local theater. Then she'd tell her mom that she met him in the theater. Unfortunately, as the old military adage goes, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. According to Nick, when they met in the theater, Gypsy took him to the men's restroom and they had sex there. Then they split up and entered the theater separately, Gypsy with her mom and Nick alone. Apparently they were the only ones in the theater watching a screening of Cinderella. Dee Dee immediately disliked Nick, telling Gypsy that he was a creep and weird, which, by the way, not as entirely untrue, as we discussed earlier. But Dee Dee's assessment was that he was a creep and weird for being a single adult male in a theater watching Cinderella, which, like, if you're a single adult and you want to watch whatever movie, go for it. Like, I don't subscribe to that idea that there are certain movies you can't watch or whatever.
If you watch their interpretation of this in the act, it's honestly so comical. Like he's following them around the theater and sitting behind them. That is creepy.
Yeah, I mean, if that actually happened, which I don't know if it did or not, like the show showed that, but I don't know if that's like, taking liberties with the story. If that happened, that's really fucking weird and creepy. But like,
Well, I think I don't pay particular attention to the other people at the cinema unless they are doing something that draws my attention toward them, which leads me to believe he was doing something strange.
yeah. And like knowing what we know about his background, like his criminal background and like jacking off at a McDonald's, I do think he must have done something particularly weird.
Yeah.
So with that plot in ruins, Gypsy Rose and Nicholas John moved to Plan B.
So by this point, any attempt Gypsy has made at forging relationships in the outside world has been foiled by Dee Dee. And Gypsy realizes that the only escape from her mother is if one of them dies. So Gypsy and Nick began plotting Dee Dee's murder. And Gypsy goes as far as to steal a knife from Walmart to use for the crime.
Which is, by the way, at least smart enough in that there is no paper trail linking her to the knife.
Yeah.
Which is like probably one of the only smart things they did in this entire thing.
So Dee Dee and Gypsy shoplifted all the time, though.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mention this earlier, but Dee Dee has a criminal record herself of, I think, faking checks when she was in Louisiana.
Yeah, check fraud.
Yeah. So it's like, at least in terms of Gypsy, I think it was learned behavior from her mom.
I've worked in retail a couple different times, too. And thieving families is a really big thing. Like a mother who has a stroller, for instance, and just like shoves tons of things in the kid's stroller is like a really common thing.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Gypsy, yeah. So using Gypsy and like her wheelchair, for instance, as a vehicle to steal things, like doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. And it's really sad, too, because if you're a parent, you probably shouldn't have a shoplifting ring with your own family, but like, you do you.
Yeah, never mix your business with your personal life. If you're going to have a criminal enterprise, at least separate your ring from your family.
We had one woman who ran and whose like daughter was, waiting in the car to start the car. But she must have had a couple DUIs because she had to blow into a breathalyzer before her car would start. And she was screaming at her poor kid to blow into the tube for her.
Oh, that is a hell of a story. Oh, I feel like it's like a scene in a Guy Ritchie movie.
Yeah, it's sad though. Like it is really sad.
Yeah. Anyways, in June of 2015, Nick returned to Springfield. Gypsy had bought him a Greyhound ticket, and Nick checked into a nearby motel and waited for a text from Gypsy to indicate that Dee Dee had gone to sleep. That evening, Gypsy and Dee Dee were painting each other's nails. They had reconciled after a fight, and Dee Dee started to feel at ease. Her last words to Gypsy, "Don't hurt me now." She went to sleep, and Gypsy texted Nick. Upon receiving a text, he went to Gypsy's house, where she had left the door open with gloves, duct tape, and the aforementioned knife nearby. He went to Dee Dee's bedroom and stabbed her to death while Gypsy hid in the bathroom in the fetal position, covering her ears to the screams of her mother. Nick and Gypsy then had sex in the latter's room. Gypsy alleges that she only had sex with Nick to prevent him from having sex with her mother's corpse. During intercourse, Gypsy also claims that she screamed for him to stop, thereby withdrawing consent, but he didn't. On the other hand, Nick alleges that it was entirely consensual. Either ways, they clean up the murder scene before taking a cab to Nick's motel. The couple spend a few days in the motel, making sure to mail the murder knife and about $4,000 to $5,000 in cash that they took from the Blanchard house to Nick's home in Big Bend, Wisconsin, via the United States Postal Service, by the way. And according to them, they did that so they could avoid being caught with the knife. They then took a Greyhound back to Wisconsin, where they were captured by police a day after Dee Dee's body was discovered.
Fearing that Dee Dee's body would have rotted in the house, Gypsy says she composed the Facebook post that we read at the beginning of the show, like, "That bitch is dead," to prompt neighbors to check in on Dee Dee and find the body. This worked as it led to the discovery of the body, but it also made it super easy for police to then track the Facebook post to Nick's house in Wisconsin. These two were not sophisticated criminals by any means. By the time police have Gypsy Rose and Nick in custody, the evidence against them is overwhelming, And Nick especially just straight up tells everything to the police officer interviewing him. She just lets him talk, and he just keeps hanging himself. Gypsy, meanwhile, feigns shock when the detective tells her that her mother has died. And she, like we said earlier, she has this high-pitched voice, and when she's confronted by the officer, her voice raises up again, and she's like, "What? My mother is dead, and you think I did it?" And
holy shit, that's a disturbing similarity. Oh my fucking god.
the police see right through it because all the physical evidence is right there. But I think the whole situation is distressing for Gypsy, but I think it's particularly distressing for her that the tactics that her mother had forced her to use to manipulate other people for years, like the high-pitched voice and this feigned innocence and weakness, they're no longer working. Like, she does not know any life or strategy other than this.
Yeah, I mean, children learn their most fundamental behavior from the adults around them. It's like monkey see, monkey do. So if that's all she understood, if this sort of like feigning vulnerability is the only way she could have gotten on her mom's good side and thus gotten like food, clothing, etc., I don't think she understands morality the way we do. I don't think she understands reality the way we do. We're going to get into this later, but it's just sad to see, honestly.
Yeah, it's really disturbing.
Yeah. Gypsy Rose Blanchard ultimately pled guilty to second-degree murder, the prosecution having dropped the charge down from first degree due to the mitigating circumstances around her and her mom's relationship. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison, which she's currently serving. Meanwhile, Nicholas Goad John pled not guilty to first-degree murder. His entire claim, by the way, was being rested on the fact that he was manipulated by Gypsy Rose, and he wouldn't have done it without her urging. And on the fourth day of his trial, I think, or third or fourth day, Gypsy Rose testified, even though her plea deal did not require her to testify in his trial. He was found guilty by a jury, the jury having been given the option of finding him guilty on either first-degree murder, second-degree murder, or involuntary manslaughter. And they found him guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. From the HBO documentary Moby Dead and Dearest, the interviewer asks Gypsy, "Are you happy that your mom is not here to abuse you anymore?" "Yeah, but at the same time, I'm not happy that she's dead." And also, Gypsy does mention in the same interview that she's happier in prison than she ever was with her mom.
Yeah, that's real messed up.
Yeah, it's sad. Most people, when they go into prison, they lose weight, and Gypsy Rose actually gains weight in prison.
Yeah, because she, no longer had the feeding tube and stuff, and she could just eat and drink and walk around like a normal person. She's, of course, is not taking all these medications that she didn't need that were causing her ailments. She's physically much healthier.
Yeah. So, it's really sad that her life in prison is by all metrics, much better than her life at home.
Yeah.
So let's discuss Munchausen's on a broader sense. Munchausen by proxy and the way Dee treated Gypsy, we can all agree is abuse. So is it murder or self-defense if a victim of abuse kills their abuser? And is there a difference, legally and morally and practically, if the victim kills their abuser in the middle of being abused versus it being a plan that's hatched over a longer period of time?
So this makes me think of partners, usually women who kill, their spouses after years of abuse. It's called battered spouse syndrome. It was called battered women syndrome, but battered spouse syndrome is, more accurate. And there's a case that this really reminds me of. It's that of Sally Challen in England. And basically, Sally suffered years of physical, sexual, and psychological abuse at the hands of her husband, Richard. And one day she just snapped and she beat him to death with a hammer. And when this happened, he wasn't in the act of abusing her. He was eating breakfast or something like that. And she was originally convicted and jailed for murder. But then after appealing the case and taking into account the years of coercive control Sally endured, the murder conviction was reduced to manslaughter, and Sally was released from prison because in the UK, manslaughter carries a smaller sentence than it does here in the US. But interestingly, both Richard Challen's family and Dee Dee Blanchard's family said that the killing of their respective family member was justified and that they were horrible people who got what they deserved.
Yeah, in the documentary Mommy Dead and Dearest, I remember a point where after Dee Dee's dead and she was cremated, no one wanted to pay for the cremation. Like none of her family wanted to pay for the cremation, nor did they want to like take her ashes. Like actually, and this is what genuinely fucking like blew my mind. Her dad and her stepmom ended up flushing her ashes down the toilet because no one wanted anything to do with it.
Yeah, and I think so. The one thing I kind of can't totally put together here, we know that Munchausen and Munchausen by proxy, it is pathological, and lots of, pathological personality issues stem from childhood, like some sort of abuse. And as far as we know, Dee Dee Blanchard's family says nothing like that happened and like everything was totally normal. But considering that they also obviously like hate her, is it possible that like she was just always kind of the black sheep and was treated like shit and like it messed her up?
It's putting the cart before the horse. Whether we don't know whether she was always treated like shit and that messed her up, or if they hated her more recently because of
the check
trail of
fraud
obstruction. Check fraud. Her mom, like apparently, like she starved her mom to death, allegedly. She was poisoning her stepmom, again allegedly. So like, I don't know. Like it's very hard to tell when this like what came first. Like the chicken or the egg.
Yeah, it's just like we said before, there's some elements of this case that, I don't know, it just doesn't totally add up to me.
Yeah, and it sucks because we're never going to get proper answers from this.
Right.
And just as an aside, I mentioned in the beginning of the episode that Dee Dee worked as a nurse's aide for a while, so she was much more able to manipulate the healthcare system than your average mom. Like she knew all the medical terms, all the medical symptoms, how to induce symptoms. She had all the tools at her disposal to take her Munchausen by proxy to the next level.
Yeah, and at the time Gypsy was born, so 1991, the internet was around, but it wasn't like it is today. Now you can just look up online, like, what do I say to my doctor to get a Xanax prescription? Not that you should do that, but like, those sorts of things exist. She like obviously had to put some more thought into this than that.
Yeah, and I think her profession helped in that sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Gypsy Rose was failed by every level of the American system. And of the like 100+ visits she went through in hospitals, basically like a rotating door of visits. And I think before I get into this, it is important to note here that they moved to New Orleans before Katrina, but when Katrina hit, they ended up moving to Missouri because of the hurricane. And they moved to the Ozarks. And there, one and only one doctor in her entire history noticed a discrepancy. Dr. Bernardo Flasserstein, who is interviewed in the documentary Mommy, Dead and Dearest. And he's a pediatric neurologist who noticed that Gypsy's legs had normal muscle tone and mass, despite allegedly not being able to walk. So if you're paralyzed from the waist down and you use a wheelchair all the time, your muscle should deteriorate in your legs because you're not using it. And hers didn't.
It's called atrophy. Like my brother broke his foot at one time. He had a stress fracture and he had a cast for a while. And like his leg in the cast got super, super skinny. And that was only for like 6 weeks.
Yeah, and my friend had the same thing, Meher. She broke her foot. And the leg that was broken was significantly less toned than the leg that wasn't.
She, at this point, was alleged to have been in that wheelchair for like 10 years.
Yeah. This doctor ends up ordering several more tests, like an MRI and several blood tests, and they showed no abnormalities whatsoever. And he reached out to doctors in New Orleans, and they confirmed his suspicion that there was no muscular dystrophy, at least for that particular diagnosis. So he documented his suspicion of Munchausen by proxy in a letter, but he lacked the confidence to act. And he says in the documentary that the doctors are expected to contact CPS in cases of neglect, but this was a case of over-involvement, for lack of a better word. This was not entirely true, by the way. CPS does expect you, and CAS in Canada do expect you to contact them if there is a case of abuse through Munchausen by proxy. So I suppose that's him laundering his reputation or trying to make excuses for his lack of action.
Yeah, and also, like, if giving alcohol to your underage child and, like, thereby poisoning them is a crime, then why wouldn't giving any other medication that your child doesn't need to them be the same kind of offense?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what his real excuse was in that sense, but he didn't act. He just wrote this letter and saved it on her file in that particular hospital. But Dee Dee is really smart and cunning in the way where she regularly requests access to Gypsy's health records, which she can do because she's her legal guardian. And so she found this letter and just stopped going to this particular doctor and went to other doctors instead. And I do want to say here that the United States healthcare system is just dog shit awful, like incredibly abysmal. And we all know that from, if you follow politics at least. But this case shows one of its glaring weaknesses in that having a patchwork of medical providers means that each set of facilities is an isolated silo in terms of information. So if you have universal healthcare, like in the UK, for example, with the NHS, they have a unified database where your medical records can be accessed by any medical provider in the country or province, in the case of Canada. Anywhere, like if you went to any other hospital, doctors would have seen Dr. Flasserstein's letter because it's in the same database. In Canada, it's unfortunately not on a federal level, it's on a provincial level. But if you move anywhere within the same province, they will be able to see your record.
Also, Canadian provinces are just like really big.
Yeah, like it's massive. Like I don't know if it's logistically possible to have a federally controlled healthcare system in Canada. I don't know. Like I'm torn on that either ways.
Yeah.
Without that single database, it is difficult for doctors to see previous information and they have to rely on the mom recounting the history. And several doctors did note that the mom is an unreliable narrator, but nobody did anything about it besides just note that. Also, the other thing is that medical providers in the US, it's a for-profit system. So hospitals have an incentive to put patients through useless and possibly painful tests and procedures, including surgeries, as we saw with Gypsy, because such procedures would cost a lot of money. And the hospital would hope to milk the patient's insurance dry. Like if they either they have insurance or they don't. If they do, they want to put them through as many MRIs, as many CAT scans as possible to get the money. And if they don't, they'll still do that because they can still charge you for these procedures.
Dee Dee and Gypsy were on Medicaid, which is government subsidized health insurance in the United States. It's kind of complicated to sum up, but basically it doesn't operate as a fully integrated system like the NHS in the UK. It's very convoluted, and oftentimes it's really difficult for patients just to figure out what medications and procedures might be covered and where. It's not as though if you are below the poverty line, for instance, your healthcare is free. It doesn't work like that. Like you're put on this Medicaid plan, and it's just like any other insurance plan where they look for excuses to jerk you around, basically.
Yeah, like it's basically a public insurance option instead of like a genuine universal healthcare plan, you know?
So I live in the United States. Amr lives in Canada. And here in the United States, with healthcare, everything is a scam. So I went to the doctor yesterday, actually, not like my primary physician, but like to a doctor's office to get a COVID antibody test. And it is the law that if you have like even the most basic health insurance, which I do, that the antibody test has to be covered. So good, right? One would think. However, the visit to the doctor to get the antibody test is not necessarily covered.
Gotcha.
Right. Every single thing is like, another thing is I have an EpiPen. There's no generic medication for an EpiPen. It's not as if you can ask your pharmacist, don't give me EpiPen, give me BepiPen or whatever. So because of that, I have to pay full cost for the EpiPen.
It's such a deranged and frankly soulless system, like just genuinely ghoulish system. There's a video of this like American, I don't know who it was, but like some interviewer who goes around the UK asking British people what they think each particular medical procedure costs in the US. So like they ask like this random British person, like, what do you think like an asthma inhaler costs in the US? And she's like, I don't know, like $10-20. And they're like, actually, it's like $500. And she's like, and people are okay with that?
One of my biggest regrets is when I lived in Lebanon, I should have honestly just gone to the pharmacy and be like, can I have all of your adrenaline? Thank you.
It's like that scene from not 30 Rock, Parks and Rec, where Swanson goes to like a restaurant and he's like, get me all your bacon. And the waitress goes away and he's like, wait, come back. I think you think I said, get me a lot of bacon. No, I said, get me all your bacon, but it's you with the epinephrine.
Yeah, and I am relatively young and healthy. Like, a peanut allergy isn't something that you have to look after in terms of taking a daily medication. And I still avoid going to the doctor and things like that because I worry about those extra costs.
Yeah, and I don't want to reveal too much about myself in this public space, but I'm living in Canada right now. I'm a Canadian permanent resident, and I came here as an immigrant. And when I was an immigrant, there were times where I was on insurance and times where I wasn't. And when I wasn't, I was genuinely dreading any if I had to go to the doctor, it better be something massive and life threatening. Otherwise, I would just tough it up because the bills were not good. And even then, the bills in Canada here for even your average clinic visit is much less than the States, I imagine. But now that I'm Canadian permanent resident, I have a health card, which means that healthcare in Canada is such that it's provincially administered. So if you're in a particular province, that province pays for your health and you get a health card that reflects that. But if I were to move to another province, I can still show them my Ontario province health card, and Ontario would pay for my healthcare if I was in a hospital in, say, Vancouver or Montreal or wherever. They would just bill Ontario. And it's just that. I can go to any hospital or clinic in this entire country and know that my healthcare will be free, and I just show them the card and I don't have to worry about anything. That's that.
Yeah.
The fact that Americans think that Bernie Sanders is the corpse of Lenin revived for proposing this notion of universal healthcare just boggles my mind.
Yeah. So going back to Munchausen's or Munchausen's by proxy, actually, one of the warning signs that a person may be afflicted with this disorder is that most of us, if told that we might have to have invasive tests or surgeries, would maybe ask for a second opinion, or we might say, what lifestyle changes can I make to avoid that result? But someone with Munchausen's, that's what they want. So when the doctor tells them, oh, you're going to have this surgery and it's going to affect you, you might have to, be in a wheelchair after, they're like, yay.
Munchausen's patients, and it is a psychosomatic disorder, but I think they're the cartoon of what right-wingers in America think universal healthcare will be if they allow it. Going into a hospital and being like, excuse me, I'd like 5 MRIs, 3 CAT scans, 2 wheelchairs, 5 surgeries, and 1 brace, please. And you can put it on the government tab.
Right, but actually, as you just said, universal healthcare prevents that kind of abuse of the medical system.
Yeah, because your records are everywhere. And also, at least for most non-Munchausen people, I guess healthy people, if I'm going to the doctor, A, it's an emergency, and B, I don't want to be on any more medication than I have absolutely have to. And if they say something yeah, we're going to need to have an exploratory surgery, so and so, whatever, my first question is going to be, what are my other options? What other options do I have?
I went to a dermatologist at one point for mild acne, which is typical of people in my age group. And she said she would give me a topical cream, and if it didn't resolve, she would put me on Accutane. No way am I taking that. I'm not going to have liver or kidney failure to get rid of acne. I'll just have the pimples.
That's a big leap from yeah, get this cream. By the way, we're going to shut down your liver.
Right. And this is no shame to anyone on Accutane. That's your body and your decision. But I think most reasonable people, when they make the decision to take or not take Accutane, weigh in these other risk factors and decide what's right for them. Whereas someone who had Munchausen's would be like, oh, I hope I get the kidney failure.
So one of the other questions that I was thinking about, and this just genuinely I don't have an answer for this. Was Nick manipulated by Gypsy, and is Gypsy a sociopath? Because on that note, mens rea, which is the legal term for whether someone is mentally aware of the consequences of their actions, did Nick or Gypsy have the psychological and mental capabilities to understand the gravity of their action and the consequences? Does Gypsy even have the capacity to distinguish reality from fiction and what constitutes death and the permanence of death, really? And was Nick aware? I don't know. Just genuinely don't know.
Yeah, my friend Lexi actually pointed out to me If Gypsy saw, for instance, police come into her house or social workers come into her house when they did at one point because an anonymous person filed a report, I think a lot of people assume it's Dr. Flasserstein. We don't really know that. But at some point, someone called social workers on Gypsy and Dee Dee. They went over to the house. Dee Dee was able to convince them that nothing, was wrong, that Gypsy was, had some arrested development and such. So I do see where Gypsy would see that and think the police never spot anything because they were right in their house and nothing happened. So she might see that and think actually I could probably get away with a murder because look at these bumbling idiots. They can't detect anything.
These hot dog sausage necked freaks.
But I could see that logic. It's pretty obvious here that the murder was premeditated. And Gypsy, I don't know if she was the one who initially suggested it, but she did talk about it with Nick. She stole that knife. She unlocked the door. She texted him when her mom was asleep. She gave him the weapon. But I don't know. Like you said, I don't know if she understood totally the finality of that act. I do think this is really a case of folie à deux or a shared psychosis where Gypsy had this very Disney-like fantasy that Nick would be a knight in shining armor and he could vanquish her mother and then they would run away and they could be happy together forever. And Nick, at this point, was already dipping his toes into sexual violence. We have the 9 hours of McDonald's masturbation. And I'm not sure if either of them would have killed if they had never met each other. Though for Gypsy, I understand the motivation behind the murder. She was desperate to get away from her mother. She didn't think that the police would be able to help her. And this was a way to escape her abuser. I think she would be less likely to ever do something like this in different circumstances. Whereas for Nick, I feel like this was more of an excuse for him to carry out his violent fantasies.
That makes sense. I think the other thing I want to mention is that Gypsy at one point in the interview does say that, and I do believe this, that Dee Dee went ahead and had a legal document drafted by a lawyer that suggested that Gypsy was mentally deficient and that Dee Dee was her legal guardian. So even if she went to cops and God knows that American cops, especially in somewhere like Missouri, aren't the most up-to-date on handling psychological issues, let's just say. So if she went up to the cops and was like, yeah, my mom is abusing me, and the mom comes in and is like, no, my daughter her brain is like the brain of a 7-year-old. She doesn't know what she's saying. And she has this letter from this lawyer suggesting that, does Gypsy have any other option at this point besides what she did?
And to be fair, I think that the story is quite unbelievable in the sense that when I first read that Michelle Dean BuzzFeed article, when I first heard of the case, my jaw dropped.
Yeah, this entire week has been just a rabbit hole. This is a genuine Alice in Wonderland experience. And I didn't hear about this case until Jamie suggested it to me. So thanks, Jamie, for being, I guess, who is it? The white rabbit that Alice chases or something? I don't know.
Yeah, from the QAnon episode.
Yeah.
But there's actually, so Gypsy Rose says in an interview with Erin Lee Carr, she says that her favorite Disney film, her and her mother are super into Disney, which it weirds me out to an extent. But her favorite Disney film is Tangled, which is Disney's cartoon interpretation of Rapunzel. And I watched it in preparation for this episode. And there's actually tons of strange parallels of this evil, I guess the mother, but the Rapunzel character has been kidnapped as a child. So the stepmother character keeping her locked in a tower and abusing her body for her own purposes and seeing Rapunzel, or in this case, Gypsy Rose, as an asset simply for, the pleasure that she brings to the mother. There are a lot of creepy parallels in this, to the point that I'm surprised Dee Dee actually let Gypsy Rose watch this over and over again that she didn't see. Also, that film is, for a PG-rated Disney movie, is pretty dark. At one point, they're gonna hang someone.
A lot of Disney films are actually a lot darker than I'd give them credit for.
Yeah, it was entertaining, but as Gypsy points out, the villain in this case, Mother Gothel, I guess I should note that there's some spoilers for Tangled here if you've never seen it. she falls out of the tower and she vanishes. She either dies, but like she's wearing this cloak, and when the cloak gets to the ground, she's not in it anymore because it's Disney, so they're not gonna like show you a animated corpse.
Unless it's Mufasa, they'll definitely show Mufasa's corpse.
Don't even. I suppose the question here is, if Nicholas Godejean had not been willing to kill Dee Dee Blanchard, would Gypsy have shopped around on online dating forums until she found someone who would? And if Nick hadn't murdered Dee Dee Blanchard or immediately been caught, would he have killed someone else? Did Gypsy kind of know what her objective was and find the perfect patsy? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like looking at the way their relationship evolved. And by the way, by the time the murder happened, they've been in this online relationship for like 2.5 years. So it's not like they met yesterday and they're doing murder today. It's been a minute. I don't know, like the way their relationship evolved, it seems like she was very much into this. It was very much a power dynamic where Nick seemed to be very dominant towards her and she seemed to be very submissive towards him. And I don't know. Also, the other thing is like, maybe she was just focused on being free. Like she didn't really understand the consequences of death. And she was like, well, if we stab her, she'll just disappear like Mother Gothel. And we'll just go and live our little, like, happy little life. I don't think she understood like how real life works,
Yeah. Also, some of the texts that are available between them, like you said, there is this element of Nick wanting to be in this BDSM relationship and Gypsy going along with it. And I don't think Gypsy Rose ever had a model for a healthy relationship. Like, I don't think we can point fingers at her and say she was like somehow manipulative in that sense, because to me, there's just no way. But the texts, I'm sorry, they're just so cringe.
Yeah.
You can tell she is interpreting relationships from Disney or the Twilight series or other things and like inserting these lines and rhetoric from those, like, I'm going to be your princess and we're going to have our happily ever after. And she's not joking.
Yeah, it's not like it's satire or irony or anything. She genuinely believes this, which is just disturbing. Also, on a related note to the text, I don't know if you told me this or if I read this in the Michelle Dean article, but Gypsy learned how to read by reading Harry Potter.
That's what Dee Dee said. I don't believe that.
I don't believe it either, but if it's true, I want to go back to my tried and true meme, read another book. The other thing in this case that I think is sort of like piqued me is that with Dee Dee and with Gypsy, how do you politely question the status of a child in a wheelchair? Because like nobody wants to be an asshole, nobody wants to look like an asshole. So like even though in the interviews, like various neighbors and friends are like, we felt like something was off, like she would always hold Gypsy's hands or whatever. No one wanted to be the one being like, do you really need this wheelchair, or are you just acting? So after everything came out, the neighbors and friends are like, it was somewhat like there were sketchy signs. Well, nobody did anything, and how do you do something to that situation?
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. If I saw another person look at a child in a wheelchair and say like, I think you can get up and walk, I'd be like, wow, what a complete asshole. Like,
yeah,
what a terrible, terrible thing to do. But I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think we also need to have a discussion about our very flawed perceptions and stereotypes of what child abuse and abusers look like. First of all, these perceptions are often highly racialized, and crucially, the Blanchards are white. I think this is actually really important in this story. If a poor Black single mother would have brought her child to the hospital with possible fictitious ailments, even if those ailments were like totally legit, she probably would have been accused of drug seeking. I'd actually bet money on it. Black people have like a really hard time accessing prescription medication, even after major surgeries and things like that. Wanda Sykes actually has a bit about it, like how hard it was for her to get pain medication. And she's a wealthy, famous comedian. She just happens to be Black.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I have experiences. I work in the healthcare sector, and I've seen experiences where there has been very very open well, not open. It's more like a passive discrimination against Black people and people of color in terms of like how parenting should be or ought to be. And I don't want to go into specific cases because I don't want to violate PHIPAA, but yeah, I've seen some disturbing things.
Yeah, and I think we so often associate abuse with conditions like neglect, which neglect can constitute abuse on its own. But Gypsy was clean, fed. It appeared to outsiders as though Dee Dee was taking really good care of her. Unlike some parents who, maybe they work overtime, they work second jobs to provide for their children, and then they forfeit time with their kids in that process, Dee Dee spent all her time with Gypsy. Right? Like one of the most common complaints against allegedly abusive or neglectful parents is like they work all the time. They're never there for their kids. Maybe because of this, they feed them unhealthy food or they let them go out on their own, XYZ thing. Dee Dee wasn't doing any of that. And also, she didn't openly drink. She didn't openly use drugs, although it's possible she was, taking some of Gypsy's medication or she had her own. We don't know. But these are conditions that are like often associated with being a bad parent and like the uptight culture that we live in. If you struggle with alcohol addiction, there will be an assumption that's usually unfounded that you're not a good mother. And Dee Dee didn't fit that stereotype.
Yeah, American evangelicism strikes again as a broad political culture.
Right. And like another example is if a parent works in the sex industry, for instance, they will be constantly interrogated about their credentials as a parent. People will like assume that the child must have a bad image or relationship with sex with no justification other than the parent's profession. But Dee Dee, like she must be aware of all these things because she paints herself as like some good girl from the bayou taking care of this poor, sick child. 100% there are so many stereotypes that go into this, and she's playing on all of them.
Yeah, like when you see people like right-wing conservative types perpetuate the notion of traditional family values and like all these dog whistles and all these coded terms, it's never about Dee Dee. It's never about people like Dee Dee. It's never about criticizing that kind of parenting. It's always racialized. It's always targeted toward LGBTQ people and sex workers and people who are struggling with addictions, but it's never about this kind of abuse. Like if you look at the kind of things you like from kind of like Michael Penn, sort of Jerry Falwell, kind of traditional family values, dog whistling, it's never about this.
And also, like I've seen some posts about Rod, the father, and like, how is it possible that he didn't know? Well, first of all, Dee Dee deliberately alienated Gypsy from him, but also she was able to fool medical professionals. Like how could he have figured out if all of these doctors seeing her, with only a couple exceptions, also totally bought into it? And Dee Dee was even able to talk her way out of that social work investigation. What's really messed up to me is that one way that she did that was by painting Gypsy Rose as mentally behind others of her age. And discounting an abuse allegation for that reason is a huge error because disabled people of all experiences are more likely to be singled out for abuse, specifically because they might be more vulnerable in some ways, and abusers prey on those vulnerabilities. So assuming that because someone has a disability that they cannot be abused or that, the abuse is unfounded is ridiculous. Absolutely mind-boggling that would happen.
Yeah, those honestly, I genuinely think those social workers should have their licenses revoked or at least under investigation because that is a horrific visit if that act like the way it happened. The fact that she was mentally behind, like if not the fact, but like the fact that they thought she was mentally behind the age of others doesn't mean she wasn't being abused. It just means that they needed to figure out a way to get her to articulate her experience, like figure out a language by which she can articulate her true experience. And it just sounds unrelated at first, but it reminds me of, I think we spoke about this before on the podcast with the Bruce MacArthur killings in Toronto, where he targeted gay men of color, specifically older brown men who he knew did not communicate their homosexuality or queerness to others, and so were vulnerable. Yeah, like you said, people that are vulnerable, people that can't communicate, or for a variety of political or physical or mental reasons can't communicate, are much more likely to be abused than people who are able to communicate and have connections with a lot of other people. And to go back to your point about the dad, yeah, not only did she paint a picture of him as a monster to Gypsy, but they physically moved away. Like, the dad remained with his second wife in Louisiana, and they moved to Missouri. One of the things I remember from the interview is that when Gypsy turned 18, the dad called to wish her a happy birthday, and Dee Dee was like, yeah, by the way, don't mention that she's 18. And he's like, why? And she's like, well, she's just mentally deficient, and we don't want to remind her of her age, or some dumb excuse. But if you're the dad and you don't see your family, and you just take the word of your ex-wife, you're like, okay, yeah, she lives with her, so she knows best. I don't blame him for that. He didn't do much wrong, and I think he blames himself, and I'm really sorry for that, because he didn't do anything particularly wrong here.
Yeah, Dee Dee was a really, really skilled gaslighter. And also, just circling back to the abuse and vulnerability thing, lots of children, unfortunately, might be victims of abuse. And it's specifically hard for them to articulate that because they don't understand. Of course, kids make things up all the time. Like, my little cousins will tell me stuff like, one said they're getting a pool. They're not getting a pool. They just say things. I don't know. But if there are allegations of abuse, or if a child is saying something outside of what they should know or understand, like my 5-year-old little cousin knows what a swimming pool is, but, she wouldn't know about certain adult topics because she's just a kid. And that's specifically why teachers, for instance, are trained to look for those signs in children. Like, speaking about adult topics or sexual topics is a huge indicator of abuse. And that is why Dee Dee pulled her out of school.
Yeah. I mean, it genuinely seems like Dee Dee cut any possible route of connection for Gypsy with anyone besides Dee Dee.
I'm very skeptical of homeschooling. But the issue is, I am skeptical of homeschooling because I believe that school provides a lot more for a child than just a book-smart education. You learn to socialize. There are other adults around to spot instances of abuse and all these other reasons that a kid would go to school. And especially for children from low-income families and stuff, it gives them an opportunity to have lunch and things like that. But even with my skepticism of homeschooling, I would agree that an exception should be children with very specific needs who might benefit most from not being in, a so-called regular school environment. And Gypsy would appear to fit the bill.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I do agree with you in your criticism of homeschooling in terms of school being a vehicle for providing social education and how to navigate conflicts with your peers, or learning soft skills that are much more important than a book smart education. But if people believe that Gypsy needed a wheelchair and a feeding tube and so on and so forth, then I could see why homeschooling would be an option. That being said, as someone who works in healthcare in Canada, I can tell you that Canada's laws, or Ontario specifically, stipulates that every child is entitled to an education at school, regardless of anything. So if you're a child with various disabilities like Gypsy would have been, and you wanted to go to school and your parents wanted to send you to school, then it's the duty of the state to arrange that, whether it's through finding an accessible school, setting up nursing visits so that the nurse can go in and feed you through your feeding tube and monitor your status, your blood, etc., etc. And I think that's good. That's something that should be pursued.
It's the same in the United States.
Yeah.
Or at least in New York State where I live, any child is entitled to a government school education. I'm more skeptical of homeschooling in situations where parents don't want their children to learn about evolution, those sorts of...
or sex ed.
Yeah, those sorts of curricula. And in the United States, statistically speaking, most children are homeschooled for those kinds of religious reasons. And it tends to be overwhelmingly evangelicals.
Yeah. And I don't think that's good. I think I had an argument with someone online a while ago where they're like, yeah, well, in Cuba, communism is bad because in Cuba they force kids to go to school where they're indoctrinated to love Fidel Castro. And I'm like, first of all, you're legally obliged to go to school almost anywhere in the world. Second of all, it's a good thing, and places that don't have that law should have that law. And third, saying that kids in Cuba get indoctrinated is quite patronizing and racist because kids in America get equally indoctrinated by their own ideological apparatuses.
We said like the Pledge of Allegiance every single day. And literally, as soon as I learned that I could stop, as soon as I was aware that it wasn't a requirement and that I legally could not be forced to do it, I stopped doing it.
Yeah, God bless.
But I was quite the outlier where I lived. I remember in another instance, it must have been around 2003 when the United States invaded Iraq. I repeated what my parents had told me, which is that it was about oil. And my teacher went ballistic.
I thought you were gonna say, instead of the Pledge of Allegiance, I sang the Iraqi national anthem or something. No.
Where are you now, Mrs. Miller? I was right.
Yeah, fuck you, Miss Miller.
But this kind of sums up my thoughts about this case and kind of the ambivalence that I have toward it. I don't even know how I feel about the 10-year sentence, because on the one hand, I think Gypsy is guilty of premeditated murder in the legal sense, but I don't think that it is a fair and just sentence. For anyone. I don't agree with life sentences. I don't agree with a life sentence in the case of Nicholas Godejohn. I think he clearly has some mental issues. And I think if we believe in rehabilitation, then a life sentence doesn't go along with that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, at least for me, I'm fully aboard. Like, personally, I'm fully aboard the free Gypsy Rose train. She doesn't deserve to be in prison. She deserves to be freed. She suffered enough, and she doesn't need to be punished any more than what her mom put her through. As for Nicholas, he should be at least in some sort of rehabilitative facility for his various sexual proclivities, his violence, and so on. To seek that sort of rehab. But yeah, it's just such a depressing case, honestly.
Yeah, I think too, if Dee Dee had kidnapped Gypsy Rose as a baby and done all of this to her, would there even have been a murder case? Or would it just have been super clear-cut self-defense, killing your abuser?
Yeah, I think a lot of leeway is given to biological relatives in cases of abuse that would otherwise have not, in cases of like adoption or like kidnap. And I think that's wrong. Statistically, you're much more likely to be abused by someone possibly a family member, than a random stranger who kidnaps you off the street.
Yeah, I also think in terms of Nicholas Godejohn's life sentence especially, I don't know about the state of Missouri specifically, but here in the US generally and in New York, if you or someone close to you has been the victim of a crime, you are usually entitled to read what's called a victim impact statement at sentencing, and then sometimes again at things like parole hearings. So basically, you are entitled to go in front of the court, in front of the judge, and say, my sibling was the victim of this murder, and here's what type of person they were, and here's how it's affected me. And, some people use that simply as an opportunity to face this person and express their feelings. Others will ask for harsh sentencing because of how much it has hurt them. And other people also ask for lenience because, they or their loved one has these certain values that they want to espouse. And actually, I hope if someone hurt me, I hope I or my family could be the type of person who would hold on to the fact that I am generally against carceral punishment. But in this case specifically, Dee Dee's family fucking hated her. So I don't believe that they would support a life sentence for Nicholas Godejohn. I mean, I don't know the specifics, but that's a bit strange to me.
I mean, they flushed her ashes down the toilet, so that says all you need to know about how they feel about her.
Yeah, and the state of Missouri has the death penalty for first-degree murder, which is what Godejohn was convicted of. So I wonder if life in prison is comparatively seen as the lenient sentence there.
Maybe that was the way for the judge to offer some sort of leniency, whereas otherwise he would have given them the death penalty. I don't know.
Yeah, just a lot of questions lingering behind this one.
Yeah.
So, if you have enjoyed our podcast, our discussion, the first thing that you can do is subscribe. This is episode number 10. Wow. So
double digits.
Yeah, we're holding on. You can also visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/DosCriminal. We give you guys plenty of bonus content. We're about to record like a bonus chit chat episode that will go up on Wednesday. And then the first Wednesday of every month, we have a full-length bonus episode. And also you get a voice in the cases that we discuss.
Yeah, I used to think that we have a direct democracy, but I think it's more of an oligarchy where our Patreons control our podcast, and the plebes, the free listeners, the plebeians are like Spartan helots, so to speak.
Also, if you subscribe to our Patreon at any level, you will get a shout out here. And when we get to certain increments on our Patreon, like donation increments, we give everyone a bonus episode on Patreon.
Yeah, so do subscribe if you like us. Tell your friends to subscribe. Tell your doctors, your various medical professionals in your lives. Tell them to subscribe. They might like this episode. Tell your social workers. Tell your neighbors, your friends. Tell everyone to subscribe.
Yeah, and you can also find us on Instagram. We post photos and videos that are relevant to our cases, and also just some behind-the-scenes content if that's something that interests you. Rate us on your podcasting app if it allows you to do so, please.
Yeah, please do. And I think I want to conclude this with letting everyone know that Gypsy Rose has reconnected with her father and stepmother. She has told reporters that she would rather be incarcerated by the state than live in a prison of her mother's abuse. To both of us, really, that says a lot about the torture she endured for all of these years.
Yeah, I think we're both hoping that Gypsy can recover from the abuse that she's faced and go on to live the healthy life that she deserves.
Yeah, free Gypsy Rose.
Thank you guys for listening. To our $5 Nut Patreon subscribers, we will catch you on Wednesday with a short bonus episode. And to everyone else, we will be back next Monday with a case selected by our patrons. It is the attempted assassination of Andy Warhol. So see you then.
Yeah, see you everybody. Bye.
Bye.